Hello everybody, welcome to the after lunch session. We're going to do one sweet little workshop about test-driven development and testing as a whole. So the workshop is about test-driven development, but in a pragmatic way, in terms of we all have deadlines, we all have demanding managers, and how to put those best practices of writing tests first or writing tests at all in your development lifecycle. It's really fun, you'll enjoy this. My name is Luka Muzinic, I come from Zagreb, Croatia. I'm an independent contractor, which is a fancy way for a developer, which is then fancy way of saying a guy that touches a code that nobody wants to touch. So it sounds like a fancy title, but in reality, I do legacy systems and optimize and make them better. I'm also a teacher / mentor. I've been teaching web development course for like 5 years, and a lot of my teaching habits have stick on. So I, for example, immediately notice when somebody in the back is chewing gum. I will call your parents if you don't bring your homework, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. So I really like doing this, these workshop style things. I also have some ground rules, something that we can just agree on right now, is that you can ask questions. You don't have to wait for the right moment to ask questions. So you can ask questions right now, just raise your hands. If I'm in the middle of the sentence, I will wait for the sentence to complete, and then you'll get to ask. And there is no really bad time to ask me. I mean, if you get a question 20 minutes later about a part that was mentioned before, ask it then. If a question pops out after the session on the dinner, come talk to me. I can answer with my mouth full. It's not a bit pretty, but we'll get an answer. If you get a question 2 weeks later, find me on Twitter, find me somewhere on internet. I'm easily reachable on Slacks and everything. So yeah, ask again, and I will probably give you something useful to go on. I always like to start my presentations with existential questions. Why do we need testing? Do you do tests at all? Yeah? What did you test today? Nothing, really? I mean, I tested a few things today. In the morning when I poured a cup of coffee, I tested it if it was hot. So I took a sip first, and then, okay, I can easily enjoy it. I didn't gulp the whole thing in. And you are used to testing stuff throughout your lifestyle, and you're used to believe in things that other people tested. For example, you don't do a car crash every time you buy a new car because you believe that people of the company have tested that car and crashed it for you. So testing can be sometimes expensive. Sometimes you have to smash them. But you can also rely on other people. When I came into this room, I also tested if everybody can see the slides properly. So I went to the back, looked at the screen, and verified that everything works. So apart from me liking to teach and like to talk about software, I also was a developer who didn't test. I was one that said, oh, it's a waste of time, and I didn't have the luxury and time to do it. And I also became a developer that now writes tests and talks about testing and encourages people to do it. Because I've been bitten a lot of times with the code that didn't have tests. I've delivered features that didn't meet the recommendation, the requirements from the client. So I've been embarrassed a couple of times, and I don't want people to make the same mistake as I am. So tests saved me from stupid mistakes. Tests saved me from broken builds. And yet still people are hesitant to write them. I don't know if you know somebody who who does not write them. But if you do, yeah, send them to this workshop. So, are we software testers? Is anybody here a software tester? Do you consider yourself a software tester? Do you know what software tester's job is? Can you take a guess?
It's like quality assurance in a company who can write some kind of tests to assure the consistency of an application.
Okay, close enough. When I was in high school, I had a teacher teach me programming in Turbo Pascal. And it was like more mathematical exercises. For example, ask user for a number of sides and then draw N-shaped object on the screen. So I would do the implementation and ask a professor to verify my code, and he would come. The input would say enter number of sides, and he would enter letter A and press enter, and Pascal would, of course, break. And then I would say, okay, smart one, figure out what I need to do. And then he would come over and on an input just press enter, an empty input. Of course, again, breaks the application, and after a couple of runs, I finally managed to make him enter 6 so I can draw hexagonal object on the screen. What I didn't know back then, it was really annoying, but like 20 years later, I said, oh yeah, input validation. I need to validate every input my users give me. And that's exactly a software tester's job. I mean, software tester's job is to break your application. He doesn't go with the best flow or the flow that requires a user should log in and then visit this page. No, he goes immediately to a forbidden page to see if you're letting him through. So software testers are really persons that break your application. They find a way how to provoke an error. So we know a little bit about software testing because we are used to working with that, and we know some edge cases. But there are a lot of things that we also do. For example, when we talk about testing, we talk about writing tests. We are not actually writing tests. We are actually writing an automated checks that will validate our code with one point in time. So all the tests that we write are just automatic checks. And I also make the same mistake. I'll call them tests as well. But bear in mind, they are nothing but the automated check that will check some assumption. So having those automated checks in your code base that you can run over and over again is very valuable. But you can also ask, where do you find those tests? Where do can you buy them? Is there a market that you can go and purchase a test case? Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, you have to have some experience. And with that experience, you'll know that you'll also have to test for like nulls, empty arrays, maximum integers, zeros, negative integers, and so on and so forth. So you'll know there are some like edge cases that don't work if you are validating, if you are requiring a user email, you know how to create a bad email, and so on and so forth. So your experience is a great sort of tests. Also, there are requirements that come directly from your client. Well, the client might say, okay, you can't withdraw more than 5,000 euros from your bank account at one time. So that by itself is a great example of a test case. You can also say a logged out user cannot visit some pages. That's also a great requirement. You can also get test cases from QA. So if a person that tested your software comes back with a report and says these things don't work, you can use that report to write test cases so it doesn't happen again. To move up a little bit on the embarrassment scale, you can use, you can monitor your error log, for example. So if you see that Nginx is throwing out 500s, okay, there's a URL with a problem, you can go fix it. So hoping that nobody saw that on a production, it was just some Google bot crawling your website. Or you can have even more embarrassing email from your client saying, hey, our website doesn't work, or it shows a blank page and there should be some content, and so on and so forth. So all these are very, very valuable sources of test cases. And on one side, we have all those nice things where we can pick up the knowledge to write tests. And on the other side, we have a lot of excuses not to write them. I mean, do you know somebody who gives any of these excuses not to write tests? Maybe it's your colleague from work or somebody else. Let's break up a few myths. People say that tests slow you down because you don't have time in your projects to do tests. Is that correct? How many times is there a lot of time for tests in your projects, or is it something that you go along? Nobody's saying, yeah, we have plenty of time to test, so it's not an unlimited amount of time, right? But you have to squeeze it in. I usually say to people that did you try out a library just for fun to see how it works? Do you do that in your daily cycle or weekly, or try out a new library? Try out API that you need to connect to. So you did some testing, right? Okay. Have you tried writing a piece of code just to see if that makes sense, and then delete it afterwards? So what you did, you created some test file, or created some test action or something like that, and you spent time actually testing, and you deleted it. So in a nutshell, you throw that time away. And you should not be doing that, you should be writing tests instead. So drop this bad practice of writing test.php file and just verifying if everything works. Write a proper test instead. That can be included in your code base and checked on and on. Also, one of the excuses is this code coverage. If you never looked at code coverage, if you don't know what it is, it's just the amount of lines, amount of code that's being tested by your automatic checks, and it's measured against the whole code base. So managers love it because you get an actual number, and people are always shooting for 100% code coverage, because it's a myth that if we have 100% code coverage, then no bugs will appear and our code will run perfectly. But in reality is that different industries would have like different standards of code coverage. I mean, if you are building an application that's just one API that will get requests from a mobile application that's being used for like a survey or a quiz game or something that will last like for 3 months, maybe you don't have to be so thorough with testing. But if you work in an airline industry, you might want to be more thorough with airplanes. So the code coverage can give you how many lines, how many classes have you tested fully. It can tell you how many methods, how many functions, and in the end, how many lines of code have been tested. But the sad thing is that code coverage is statistics, and as you know, statistics can be manipulated. Can you take a look at this project and tell me if it's something that you would like to work on that? Does this look good, or does this look bad? Huh? Usual. Okay, it has some green stuff, which is probably good. Something red is over there, but it's not that big. And some orange stuff kind of looks nice. But the problem is that a lot of models that are just getters and setters, those are tested perfectly. 100% of just getters and setters. No logic there, but it's tested. The command part is the command that's being run once per month to generate financial reports. That's been not tested at all. And the service that command is using is in that 35% that it's not being tested. So the vital part of the application, handling money and finances, is not tested at all. And the newsletter subscription is bulletproof. So if you're shooting for like 80%, shoot for 80% of the critical stuff and just leave like the not important things like newsletters and stuff to disappear. Also, people say that they don't have time to learn testing tools because they're too busy shipping code. So rather build one feature more. We don't have to test. We don't have to write tests. We have a Q&A. But then as your application grows, you'll have more and more job for QA. So you'll hire another QA person, and then another, and then another. And the whole volume of that work will eventually grind your application to a halt, or your application development. Because when you get the feedback from the QA, who has to test a lot of things, and then your development cycle has to start all over, and then again through the QA, and your feature will be deployed with a less and less, with a bigger time span. So eventually we'll stop and you will not be producing anything. Also, don't be scared of PHPUnit or any other tool, Behead, Codeception, any tool that you really pick to write tests. Because in a nutshell, PHPUnit is just a code runner. It will run whatever code you write inside of a method. So it's really no-brainer. You can use it for any kind of testing, not just unit tests, as the title says. So you can write like functional test, integration test. You can even build a website scraper that will just check for elements on the page. So really, it's just a testing framework. You can use it any way you like it. Tests will also answer a lot of questions. You typically want your test to answer as much as you can, but then again, be pragmatic. Don't make yourself, don't make extra rules in your daily routine, so you have to answer all of those questions. The dearest question of me is, if my code is working correctly, can you be 100% sure that the feature you just shipped is going to meet your client expectations? If a client said, I want user not to be able to withdraw more than 5,000 euros per transaction, are you 100% sure that your application is doing just that? If you tested it manually, maybe you are, but maybe somebody also did something to change that. So one of the most important things that you do by writing tests is to verify that your code is working correctly at this point in time. Also, other developer will come and said, okay, I pushed to the development branch one quick fix that is totally unrelated to your code. How many times have you heard that story? Totally unrelated to your part of the code. And somehow it still breaks your deal. So if you had tests, or if other developer had tests, it would be caught at that moment, or he wouldn't even push the code to your branch. Then again, a new developer comes to your team. How do you learn about the application? Do you go from a controller and then try to figure out what's where? Do you go through all the events that are being thrown and try to figure out pieces of logic? Do you get the documentation? Can you tell me that your application is updated? So you probably get like an outdated version of a documentation that's close enough. So if you look at the test, and the test is written in given when then scenario, so you can say, okay, if I have these objects and I call this method, then I should be able to return, verify the return. Then you will really learn about your application, learn how the system works in an easy and safe environment. So tests should be considered as part of your documentation. This one is most debatable. Does testing improve your code quality? Does testing improve your code design? It could. If you are really bad at writing that, no testing will help you. But also, if you just use tests to discuss how the thing should work and then save it later on, it can help you as a simple whiteboard just to scratch out a few things and see if everything works. And lastly, can I refactor my code? If you see a part of your code that could be done better, maybe I could shave a couple of milliseconds here, are you really comfortable in doing that change and then committing that and saying, yeah, clients still can't withdraw more than 5,000 euros? That's the power of tests. So how to write tests? There is a very good guideline, given when then. You just separate the initial state. So given the circumstances that are, I have a user with the count type 1, and then he does this, then I expect the result to be like forbidden or allowed. In a PHP unit, you have a setup method that will set up the service, object, whatever you're trying to test. And then you have this first part saying get name. So when I call that method, my result should be asserted and checked. So this is whole thing behind tests. They are simple as that, and they will run each time you call them. So, I've been talking about testing. I've showed you how the test looks and give you a bit of the background why testing is important. And right now we are going to do the actual workshop part where you will be coding and building an application. Another reminder to ask questions. Are there any questions now? Is this everything clear up to this point? Okay, perfect. Then I'm going to get into another role. Right now I'm not Luka telling you to test more. Right now I'm Luka. I'm the owner of a football league in whatever country you want to. And imagine me as a big, bold, dangerous guy that owns all the football clubs. So I come to you, to my developers, and say, I want you to build me an application that will display the league standings of my clubs. So I'm assuming that everybody is at least familiar with football. So on and so forth. I was planning to gloat that Croatia won silver in the World Cup, but there are French people here. So, yeah, jokes on them. So, if you are assuming that, if I'm assuming right that you know football and know how the matches and everything work, what is the worst part of that application? What do you feel that is going to cause most problems? Raise your hand or just shout. What are you afraid of? Do you feel it's something that you could do? Yes or no? we are developers, we're pretty much used to building stuff. Okay, what will most likely be the problem? If you, for example, if you try to save the result in a database, is that something that's going to cause problems? Perhaps, but most likely no, because a lot of people are been using the databases for a long time, so storing a thing in a database is pretty well done. So what are your next concerns? Is the designer going to design everything good? I don't care. So my biggest concern is, am I going to be able to calculate the standings table? So after a few rounds of matches, can I get the result back to you? Okay? So if that's your concern as well, we can try coding that particular part by coding a test first. Okay? Okay, let's get our hands dirty, and I just need to quick check. Did you manage to do this? So you pull the repository and okay. So if you take a look at the code base that's already there, I've created a few boilerplate things. For example, it's logical that we have teams, right? We can have team. It's just a simple object. We can also have a match. Match is a little bit complicated. But in a nutshell, I want to record that one team that was the home team played against the away team, and one team scored some points and the other team scored some other points. Okay? So it's still basically pretty simple, right? I just want to, at the end of the game, see the result on the screen and enter the values. And next, we are going to have a standings that will actually hold a lot of logic in there. Okay? So the standings will be the service that we're going to ask to get the standings after some matches happen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to test this particular service. So I'm just going to say that I want to create a PHPUnit test, and I'm going to test standings. Can you see this? Is it okay to? You can see it, or you can't see squat? I'm asking Josip in the back. You can't see anything.
I can see a pretty window. The code is okay, but this particular.
Okay, then
So it's fine.
if you're not worried about this, okay, what this will create? Maybe not this. This case. And this is going to be standings. So I'm going to do standings create, and I need to give it a name like League 2018. Okay, so if you never worked with a PHPUnit before, every method that's being prefixed with a test is going to be run after the setup is being called. So in the setup, we will prepare this standings object, and then run whatever we want. And usually best practice is just to give like the most descriptive name possible. So for example, I want to test that get Standings will return sorted league standings. Okay, so how to do that? For example, if I have a team called Elephants, Elephants and another team called Tigers. And given that a match happened between those teams, so Elephants played against the Tigers, and Elephants scored how many goals? 3 goals, okay, and Tigers scored 1. Okay, so this match happened. I want to have standings record this match, and let's call it the result. And when I call standings, I want to assert that I will get Elephants in the first place, who have scored 3 points and received 1 goal. In the end, they will have 3 points for that win, and that the Tigers, who have scored just 1 goal and received 3 goals, they have 0 points. So I'm asserting that this part is actually what's being stored in my result. Okay? Is this something that you can read, not just by font size, but is this something that you can give to somebody and say, hey, this is how my application works? Okay, so you can look at this as a piece of documentation. You can look at it as our whiteboard. Does this feel comfortable? Do you feel like coding in this fashion is understandable? There's no solutions that are out of hand or not usual or something like that. I will just wait for everybody to catch up. Okay, so if you are satisfied with this, then it's time to fire up our PHPUnit runner. How does this look? It's all right, Josip? Just font size. You know where the... Sorry? I couldn't hear you that. Oh, perfect. Okay, so you can see that our code runner, which is PHPUnit, went through the standings test and executed the method that getStandings will return sorted league results and produced an error. Of course, the error is there because it's obvious. We didn't create the record method, okay? So how to fix that? Go into our code and say, okay, let's create a public function record that will just store all the matches. Okay. Import this class and add the field okay, so I fixed an error. Do you know what's going to happen next? Do you have an idea? Try to figure out what's going to break next before I press enter. I don't have any candy to give out to the person that says something. But what do you think that will what do you think what will happen next? Will this error be there? Call to undefined method? No, of course. Not to that method, at least. Because I'm now calling the next method called getStandings. So, okay, it's an easy fix. We can do it again. So, again, in the test, I will go to the getStandings and say, okay, let's add a method. Perfect. What now? Have we run out of errors? There are plenty more. So this is a bit of a different error. And it's more related to the test that we are actually trying to make. Because right now, up until this point, we had like a little e up there. So it's a sign that there was an error. But right now, it's a F, which means the test actually failed. So we didn't meet our expectations. And if you remember, our expectations were that this should be equal to this, because that's our assertion. That's our test case. So our result is being returned as null, because we don't return anything, and we are comparing null to an array. Okay, it's still an easy fix. I'll just say return that, and then I will match the array, right? Okay. Again, my test is still failing, unfortunately. But we don't have the null does not match expected type anymore. We just have like difference between what is expected and what is actual. So actual is an array, but it's expecting a couple of more arrays inside, which is again an easy fix, because if I do this, then it will be fixed. But no, as we iterate, we'll go to, okay, I expect that this array is actually elephants. So I can say elephants that scored 3 goals, received 1, and have 3 points, against the tigers that scored 1, got 3, and have 0 points. And my tests are okay. So you can say that our application now works. Okay? We have a perfectly working application because all our tests pass, assuming that we only have 2 teams that are called elephants and tigers, and the only match that happens between them is the one with 3 goals. So of course, this is not the case, right? We need to add a couple of more cases. So feel free to write another test with a different kind of event. For example, you can write the test get standings will return sorted league result standings when second team ends up first. So you can say that Tigers team have won, like 0-1, and they will end up in the first place. So please create that test, and we'll see what to do with our application next. I'm just going to quickly check how everybody's doing. Okay. Don't worry. Let's. Okay, I just want to have a test case where when the Tigers, which are away team, win, and the assertion should be that Tigers are in first place. So, just trying to figure out if you're at step 1. You're playing.
I already checked out the
Okay. The wording doesn't have to be like that. Just okay, can anybody tell me now what's going to happen when I run the tests?
It will fail most likely once and pass once.
Yes, exactly like that. Because we still have the actual code in place that will be okay. So in the upper left corner, you see the first dot that's being marked as a passing test, and then a second test that we wrote is now failing because I say that I expect tigers 1-0 and then elephants. So this is the part that's being different, and we can't solve it just by faking the code. We actually have to build the implementation of our service. So a good advice is always to have a couple of more test cases, because if we just create one, we are actually not doing a lot of testing. So do you have an idea how we can implement the actual service? I mean, we should definitely put some more meat into the get standings. Okay, so this really does not work. What could help? There's another object that's called team standings. Team standings, my idea was to have an object that will just hold the position of a certain team inside of the league. So we can update it after each match. And then just sort everything. How do you feel about that? Is this okay? Okay, then we'll write some more tests for the team standing. Probably easier this way. So what I need to have here is a team name. So I will create one. Okay. Okay, so the most clever thing that I can think of right now is to test that there should be a method called getPoints, and when there are no games played, it should return 0. So I'm just going to check that I expect 0 when I call getPoints. And also would be wise to say that I expect after 3 games and 3 victories, I would have 9 points. But in order for that to happen, these team standings should record. Should record win, and then a couple of more times. Okay, does this make sense? So if I on a particular team standing, if I call record win 3 times, I'm recording 3 wins, and that team standing should be with 9 points. Okay, because in my league, I'm a league owner. If you win a game, you get 3 points. If you don't win a game, you get 0 points.
So every win gives you 3 points?
Yes.
Okay.
So 3 wins, 9 points. Very, very simple. I also need to record the number of received, the goals scored, and the goals against. So I will say test get points scored when there are no games, and it will be And also if I say that this team standing if in the first game we scored 1 goal, in the second game 2, and in third game 3 goals, we should have like 6. Okay? We just add up the amount of goals. And I need to do all that for the points against. And we don't get points scored, points against. And just to make it visually clear that it's a different thing, let's just add different numbers. So all this, I know it's a little bit small right now, but this is enough to actually write a perfectly functioning team standing class. So if you want to, you can go ahead, use the same technique as I demonstrated before. You can run the tests. It will show a bunch of errors that we maybe do not want to, don't want to show, especially we are not concerned anymore with those failing tests of standings series. So we are just concerned with these 5, or 6. So what you can do, you can tell the PHP unit to filter team standings. So if you do that, it will just team standing. So it will just run the 6 tests. You don't need to worry about everything. So you practically know what you need to do. You need to create method to get points, record win, and so on and so forth. Take it away. Do you need me to show something else on the screen, or? Are you able to figure out from this what needs to be done? So we need to monitor the points that you get for each win, and then how many goals we scored and how many goals we received. Sorry?
Can you unfold the last methods?
Yes. So test points against when there are no games. Yes.
Or if you win 3.
Yes, points scored are the goals that you, number of goals that you scored in that game, and the points against is the number of goals that are scored by the other team. So as you can see, you can use the test cases just to figure out if this is the look and feel of your code that you want to achieve. It's very easy to verify. For example, when you ask why is there a 9? Because each win is worth 3 points, so 3 times 3 is 9. You can filter out the by saying dash minus minus filter, and then just write team standing. Standing, yeah. So do you have a feeling that a junior developer could code with these tests? For example, if you set everything up and say, okay, go code. Okay, a lot of things that you can code badly are already covered by the linters and inspections of PHP Storm, for example. So it's saying that this is not initialized against. Sorry. So you can easily add that. So again, if you write, there are still some errors. Can you figure out, for example, why? Yeah, why does it happen? Excellent. So if somebody says, okay, the PHP Storm is showing no errors, nothing is underlined, there are still logical errors. So you should either say that they should start with 0. Okay. Oh, there's still one I forgot about. Points. And so on and so forth. Any more questions? How are you comfortable with this? Are you comfortable with this enough to go to a vacation and hand this over to somebody else to work on this feature? Okay, perfect. Then we'll do just that. There is a break in 8 minutes, but we're going to have a break early because right now our code is being done by another developer in your team. So when we come back from the break, you can check out the branch, the different branch, and continue to work on there. The reason behind this is that implementing the get standings method is a big, lengthy process, and we would lose a lot of time implementing a business feature, and we are on a testing workshop. So I'd really like you to see the benefits of testing, not write like codility tests, and so on and so forth. So if you don't want to take a break, you can continue working on that get standings method and figure out how to do it. Or take a quick break, refresh yourself, because we have another hour and a half afterwards. You have an email waiting in your inbox saying, yeah, the feature you wanted me to implement, it's there. So if you check out the step 1 branch, and then run the PHPUnit with this -- test docs, you will see why I write those names so long. So the whole test suite passes. The test that we wrote and the implementation that we wrote is still good. And we also have the standings test now pass. So those tests that we wrote at the beginning of the workshop with the elephants and the tigers are now good. Does it make you happy? Your feature is complete? If you take a look at the standings, you will see that a developer did maybe slightly less optimal job of doing. So there's a lot of code in there, but our tests pass. So our tests are verification that the feature works. It's not the prettiest job. Maybe the developer is a junior developer, still unsure how to do things.
Sorry, can you make the font a little?
Yes, I will. I just wanted to show the monstrosity of the method. So basically, everything here is crammed into one method. So if you take a look at get standings, do you see something that really bothers you? Object hashes? Why are you concerned with object hashes?
Why not use the objects themselves?
Objects themselves? Because the team standings, the property, the field team standings is an array, and I need a key. So I'm doing two. But you are actually correct. Using the object hash can be unpredictable because I don't know if I'll always get the same object. And I already implemented one thing that can distinguish teams. Do you know what that is? It's a team name. So if you want to, you can do it. So that's actually the first assignment. You can get rid of the SPL object hash because you're not 100% sure that this is the best way to go. So replace it with the MD5 or SHA-1, whatever, of team name. So you'll see that you can be very comfortable with changing the code because you know you have the safety net of a test. Okay? So try replacing all those keys here with something that is purely a string or something that we are more used to having as a key in an array. So we want to replace the SPL object hash with, for example, hash MD5. And we'll just get the name. of each team. So for example, if I forget to do something here, the tests are going to remind me. Here it is. Get me. Okay. So you can argue, okay, using MD5 is maybe not the best way. I can easily replace it, and again, easily verify that everything works. So that's the power of having a safety net and change code freely. Also, you can say that, for example, maybe this whole part should be extracted in a separate method, just to make it more visible. So we'll say that this should go into get home team standing method. We push refactor. We can do the same thing with this. Get away team standing. So our code looks a little bit better here and a little bit more ugly here, but doesn't matter. And again, does everything work? Yes. So we can say that our colleague did a good job, right? The feature works. We pushed everything to a production. The league owner is happy. The games are being played. And on the end of the season, the result table looks a little bit off. So what happened? Happened that we had two teams with the same number of points, and they didn't know how to rank them. So two teams ended up with the same number of points, and every team said, but we should be like one step in front of the other. So the league manager comes next year and says, okay, we had a case like that happen last year, we want you to change it. So we want to introduce a change in our league system. When the teams are ranked with the same number of points, we should look at the points scored, and the team that has more points scored should be in front. Okay? Is it a simple change? If you go and just change all that right now, maybe you'll mess up the previous year ranking, right? I still want to keep the previous year as it was. So I'm talking about League 2019, next year. So what I propose right now, I'm not a league owner anymore, I'm now a system architect. I propose that we introduce the rulebook into our code. So we'll create a rulebook interface and have a method that will decide whether the team should go in front or not. So we'll just focus on sorting right now. Okay? And while we do that, we're going to refactor the existing part of the standings. Because as you can see, the part of the code that does the sorting is this one. Do you understand this code? So the usort function takes an array and the callable, And the call block actually compares two objects, which are team standing. So it compares the standing of one team with the standing of the other team and says if team A has more points than team B, return 1, which will make them switch places. And if not, then do the other thing. So as you can see, in this part of the code, we don't have the case where one team can be tied with points, but we still have to have a difference in our table. So how will you approach solving a problem like that with the knowledge you learned so far? How do you want to keep the actual results doing for the actual year, current year, the way it was, and then introduce another change in the next year? Do you have any ideas? Do you want me to help you? Okay. I'll create I'll create a rulebook interface. Okay, so we have something that's going to purely decide whether one team should go in front of the other. Okay? So that method should have team standing for team A and team standing for team B. Okay, so if you introduce this interface, that should help you decide. Okay, you might ask me, but Luka, why didn't you write a test first? Because interfaces are not something that you can create in terms of an actual object. You can't test an interface. You will always test the implementation of an interface. But this is something that your architect in your company will say, okay, we'll go by this route. And now you can create two objects that will implement this interface. You can create a simple rule book that will have the current system and create a rule book for like next year, like let's call it advanced rulebook. So in a directory where I created this rulebook interface, just create two more. Create simple and advanced. And now we can talk about testing them. So one thing that you might notice is that all my tests follow the structure of the code. If it's too troublesome for you, if you're just like thinking about architecture, don't know where to put it, just put it somewhere and then refactor later. So again, don't be concerned about, am I putting the test case or the test class in the right directory? Because again, you are wasting your time on totally unnecessary thing. It's not helping your code, it's not helping the quality. Okay, so try to create the rulebooks, the rulebook tests. So create one simple rulebook and then one advanced rulebook. And what you want to do is take this part out, just split it. So you want to take this part out from the sorting, and then put that into your simple rulebook. But of course, try to write a test for that first. Okay. So the simple rulebook is meant to capture the current system where we only rank teams by points.
Yeah, and the second one?
And the second one is for next year, when the teams with the same amount of points need to consider the points scored.
So if amount of points is the same, compare score points.
Yes.
Okay.
So the team with the score points should then be ranked higher than a team with less score points. But we want to have two different classes for that because we need to have all the leagues that happened to this date and afterwards all the leagues that are going to happen later. So what are you basically testing is testing does the decide method will confront to the usort specification. Because usort says, so if you are using a separate function for sorting, like here, it says the comparison function must return an integer less than, okay, if the first argument is considered to be respectively less than the second. So if the first argument is less than a second argument, then you should return less than 0. So we have a different case because we want to sort them by descending order, but it's basically the same. So you kind of need to write tests that are like this. So these are the 3 test cases that you need to write. So you need to write that decide returns less than 0 when first team has more points than second, and so on and so forth. So we need to cover first the actual state. And this is not something that is very not uncommon in the line of work. So if you see the one part of the application that you would like to pull out, exchange, or maybe just put in a separate service, write a test for that, and then do the refactoring. Usually, you'll have 1 or 2 functional tests that are going to cover like the whole flow, like we do. But if you have like more specific cases for one part, then it's smart to move that one part in a separate service, write a couple of more, like tens of tests if you have tens of cases. Do you have anything to complain about writing those tests?
Why should we complain about writing these tests?
Okay, You're,
or maybe do some structure.
you're nicest developers I ever worked with. No complaining. 3 tests, right? And you had to create a team, then create a team standing, then create another team, and create another team standing, okay? And then on one team standing, you had to call a method to record a win so that you have a difference between those teams, and then do the assert, right? And that, it's okay with you? Does this feel like a lot of work to do? A little bit? No? Why don't you complain? This is a lot of work, and it's a lot of unnecessary work. Okay? So you'll have a situation that's maybe even worse than this, when you have to create an object that you will insert into another, and another, and another, because it's like a complex domain model. And then you have to call this method, and this method, and this event will happen. So you'll have like, given part of your test is going to be this big, and you'll just assert one number. And when testing another case, you will have to repeat all that part of the code and then assert another. So this, for me, this looks painful. And usually, I don't want to do that. Because I'm really not concerned right now about the teams and their team standings creating of that object. I'm really concerned about team standing, what to do when it returns points. Because I'm testing here my simple rule book. I'm not testing teams, I'm not testing team standings. Okay? So there is a concept that's very powerful, but also to be used wisely. It's a concept called mocking. Have you heard about it? So you can mock a class that we need right now, and we can fake it and bend it to our will to behave any way we want. Okay, if you never saw that, it will be a little bit abstract, but mocking is just extending an object. So our mocked object is still the same class of the object that we are extending, the same interface and everything, but we are just changing its behavior. Let's see. So I said that I'm interested only in the side method. Okay, I'm testing that. And for that, I need my team elephant standing. Okay? As you see, I need to create team standing, I need to create team, and that all is unnecessary. So I'll delete all that and say this get mock builder for my team standing class. Okay. There's a method called disable original constructor because my constructor is private, so I can't create it the normal way. And I will say get mock. If we dump the team elephant standing, just to show you, and I will just run this test. So if we run it, we'll see that our mocked object is actually pretty similar to the team standing one, right? It has all the properties that are needed there. The team is null because we didn't set it. So we are close to having something that's kind of usable, right? Do we agree?
There's no team, as you said, there's no points.
Oh, there's no points. Okay, but do I need to change that? Or do I need to change maybe the behavior of a method called getPoints?
It's enough.
Hmm?
It should be enough just to mock the get points.
Exactly. So let's do just that. So let's say that because my team elephant standing is not a real object team standing, it's a mocked. If I say its method getPoints will return 42. Okay? And if I say dump me this, it will return 42. Okay? If you didn't see what I did, I said team elephant standing, its method getPoints will return 42. So I'm telling my mock object how to behave. I know that this goes against all logic and all the nice code that we've written so far in the team standing, but I needed to bend to my will because I'm testing something completely different. Okay? So I'm going to do the same thing with my team tiger, and I will say get mock builder for the team standing. I will disable original constructor, and I will say to get mock. And then team tiger standing, its method getPoints will return 41. Okay? So I have the same situation as I had before, but I didn't have to introduce the teams. So I'm removing all the overhead of creating a scenario that are not needed, because developer would look and say, oh, hey, I have teams, and he would have to put the teams in a memory somewhere, but they are really not needed here because we are just testing how the decide method works. So in this case, we already know the result. It should be minus 1 as our current method. And it says OK. I'm filtering just by method name. So just one method is being tested. And now you can do the same thing to the others. So get rid of the boilerplate code and just create the mocks. If you're worried about type hinting, as you can see, the PHP Storm is saying that the type hint is not the type is not correct. You can just add that it is team standing or mock object. So it is a little bit hacky, but it covers both. Okay, so the PHP Storm will not complain, and you have the autocomplete and everything that you are used to. So when walking, there is no like rules of what number should you put in. If there is a number, I try to put a ridiculous number so that I emphasize once more that this value is mocked. So 42, 314, something that's out of the ordinary. So it'll figure out that the something is not right. And that you're working with block methods. But for our case, this is good. Is this more convenient to you, or did you like the approach before? Honest, I won't be offended if you say that you like the one before. Does this make sense? Does this remove the overhead of what you have to think about, what you have to consider? Yes, no? Yeah. Okay, so is our code now working? Not yet? What do we need to do? What's our next step?
Fix this UA sort.
Sorry?
Fix the UA sort.
Yes, we have to fix the US sort. So right now what we did, we just extracted into simple rulebook this part of the code, okay? So it works by itself, but we need to put the rulebook, we need to put this rulebook back inside of our, back inside the standings. But we also have the tests for standings, okay? What will happen to them if I just decide to put the rulebook in them? What do you expect with tests to do? They will break, okay? So first, if you want to go like real TDD way, you would have to open the standings test, and you would have to inject the rulebook here. So this tends to be a little bit difficult, especially if you are working on a large code base that you're not familiar with. So you have to know in advance that, oh, there are tests for that method that I'm trying to change. So I have to change the tests for that first, verify again that everything makes sense, and then do the change. And that's not always the case. So if you say, oh yeah, I have to update the standings, and then do the change there, run the test, and go, oh crap, it's okay. So be pragmatic about it. Don't beat yourself over it. You'll update the tests, in this case, afterwards. So it's not something to be stressed about. The tests are always a fail-safe. So as we said, we need a rule book. And right now, my code is going into two different ways. So we have like our standings with the simple rule book, and we'll have our standings with the advanced one. So I'll just rename the standings test into standings with simple rulebook. Okay. And then I'll say that rulebook is new rulebook. Okay. I will add the rulebook here. And the rest should be okay. So if I try to run the tests, it will scream that I can't create it with just one thing. I have to have two, so I also have to have a rulebook here. Rulebook. Just update the docs. And do the same thing here. I will create rulebook here. Okay. So right now the tests are not going to scream anymore because of that, but I still have to do the change in the sort, so I can get rid of the whole function and say this rule book, decide. This is just a way to tell the US sort that it should call the decide method on the rulebook object and apply the results for the sorting. So if this thing holds true, I should be able to run my test suite and we should be in green, as we are. Okay? So when you get a pull request like that, I know you won't see a lot. So when you get a pull request like that, you will see that the change is only here in the setup. Okay? So pull request with the change tests would be, oh no, so somebody changed the code and he changed the tests to confront to the change. But it's not a problem because we can review the tests first. We can say, okay, there's just a change with adding a simple rulebook. There's a new rulebook in place and the body of the test looks the same, okay? And we know that it works. So for the last exercise of the day, I want you to create the advanced rulebook part of the code. So I want you to create both the standings with advanced rulebook test and create the advanced rulebook test for the rulebook that will have like teams with same amount of points. And after that, we are ready to ship the new version of our application. Okay? So let's go with the advanced rulebook. If you want to go by creating first the standings test case with advanced book, perfectly fine. If you want to create first the advanced book test case, it's also perfectly fine. There's no rule saying that you should go either from this end or from this end. Whatever way feels comfortable to you.
We also, I mean, is it also advised to do this, or
Okay,
do we need it?
so the question is, should we also cover the test cases that we already kind of have covered with in the simple rulebook test case with the advanced one? Yes, because it's a separate class, so you don't know when somebody will going to be using it, and especially because when our league progresses, we'll still have cases when the points are not the same. So we still need to sort first by points and then the rest. So the advanced rulebook test will be.
You should also start with the same.
Yeah, because okay, I will show you later. We can quickly analyze the complexity of that method, and you will say that that method has a lot of paths, possible paths through the method until the return. So you can have like 6 different paths because you first test if it's greater, if it's not, and if it equals, and then point scored and point scored. So you have like, it can go this way, or this way, and 0. So yes, you ideally want to cover each path that can take your code, that your code can take.
Even if I, for example, extended the simple class, the simple rulebook, and I called it, so I would say, yeah, that's the what's it called, advanced.
Okay.
Extend simple. Yeah, because the first part of the decide is one and the same. I want to keep it in one method.
In that case, you could avoid it, but it's also debatable per case. So if I mean, it all boils down to have you covered all the possible code path. If not, then you'll have to write another test. I'd rather have like a duplicated test, but one fail safe if something breaks. Do you have that's the second question, or do you have another?
I had another one, but I lost it now. So
Okay. So if you remember, yeah, tell me.
back.
Can you look at the team standing constructor? It's private, so you can't do new team standing, and yeah, because we have to create. It's like a yeah. So I'm just. It's not necessary to have it private, but I'm just going to show you that. Either different approach, maybe you'll see a lot of code being written these days. DDD style comes with this.
So it basically has nothing to do with PHPUnit, but it has to do with the way it was designed.
Yes, because you'll have, especially if you try to test already written code that you didn't write or you can't change, you'll have all sorts of maybe in the constructor. There is a call to insert something in a database. You don't want to create that object because you will always create something in a database. So that's why I'm saying there's an option to create an object, mocked object, without actually calling the constructor. I mean, all those the mocking and the for example, what Doctrine does when it hydrates object. It's always a little bit magical. Because you need to create an object without actually creating it and having no side effects. So this is like the best way to create an object without there being side effects in your application. If it's If it's everything written clean, then it's totally not necessary. But if you have something like writing something to disk, then those tests would be either slower because it has to write to disk, or you have some side effects that are really not wanted. Just that you are aware of that possibility as well. Okay, what approach did you take in solving a problem? If you created tests for advanced first, that's an okay approach. I just want to show you that what I forgot to do. I forgot that you can move the construction of the mock method in the setup. So then it simplifies greatly each test case because you are just mocking the method. So you put everything up and then the mocking becomes really easy. So what I created was the advanced rulebook test that repeats the 3 cases that we already saw, but then mocks method getPointScored. And I also have 3 more cases. So point scored is 1000, which is greater than 999, and the other way around, and again, the same thing. After that, I've created the standings with advanced rulebook test, which is just, the change is just here. Those 2 cases that we have are completely the same. I just added another case that will cover everything that says get standings when tied teams by points. Not the best English, but it will do. So the Tigers and Elephants have played a game. The Elephants had 2 points, and then Elephants and Tigers played a game, and then Tigers only scored 1 point. So at the end, the Elephants will still be in front with 3 points, but as we are looking at the game's points scored, they should be up in front. So if everything went well, we can again say, let's see the test docs, and we have like the complete documentation of our code, what should happen in what situation. So you can see that our advanced rulebook should decide greater than 0 should return greater than 0 when teams are tied and the second team has more points scoring than the first. And the advanced rulebook standing will have an extra 1 when teams are tied by points. So the most difficult part of the application is being solved right now. We don't have anything to worry. Okay, because our code works perfectly. And the part where you install the framework and install the database and build all that is pretty much well tested already, so you don't have to worry about that part. So all that's left to do right now is to just make a pretty design, build an application, build a front end and back end, and we're good to go. So any questions, or should I say you should each ask me one question. We can debate whether this approach is better than what you are already used to or not. Okay, I'll do it in a minute. So the question is, what is the difference between unit test, functional test, integration test, acceptance tests, smoke tests, and everything like that? So when we are talking about unit tests, we are talking about the smallest unit possible that we can, what we did with, for example, team tests that are just to provide whether the team object works. So it's just testing one object, one method. So that's isolation. There's no other things that are impacted. So if you move from there to like integration tests, in integration tests you would like have boot up the framework kernel and test if the controller, for example, returns the JSON response.
Didn't we do something like that?
We didn't do because we don't have that much of services. Like we don't have a database, we don't have a Redis for caching, and everything like that. So as you go up with tests, you test with that type of test. You also test the connection to the database, connection to the caching, if everything is set up correctly, so on. So this is called the integration test. And you can go with the acceptance test where you just write, if I open a browser and I click on a button, I should see X. That's acceptance test because you also include the front end and everything. It's just the matter of what are you really testing. Are you testing isolated piece of the code or the whole thing? Because if you, for example, if your method calls the foreign API that gets something and then you process it further, you're not only testing your code, you're also testing the code of the service that you are using. You're testing the whole internet. Does it work between those 2 points, and so on and so forth. So maybe it makes sense in some cases, but usually you don't want to either waste time on those lengthy tests or just prepare your small world that you need to test and do that. Okay, that's a short version. Anybody else? Do you feel that this was really valuable for you? Do you feel that you are going to change the world right now by writing more tests? Or at least change your colleagues' way they think? As I said, I am a teacher, so there's homework for you. I will push my slides to my page so you'll be able to download it, and the code is already there. So there's a reading list about testing, about what tests are. There are a lot of libraries here that also do the same thing as PHPUnit. So be prepared to check them out. And also, if you want to, there are some homework things. We did the scenario where the teams have played a tie, but yeah, you can refactor by giving maybe 2 points per win, or yeah, implement a feature that you need in this project, and yeah, write a test and demonstrate that it works. I mean, talking with tests is very easy, because if you say, I think that this part of code is not working, you can easily prove it by writing a test case. And if it really, really breaks, then you have an argument that this code should be fixed. If not, then no code should be changed. Any questions? My rule that you can talk to me anytime later on or later weeks, months still applies. So thank you very much. You've been a quiet audience, but very, very easy one to work with. And enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the conference. Thank you.